Starting. There we go. Cool. We are now live. Welcome, everybody, to Let's Have a Chat. Today I have with me a very infamous face. Some of you may know, some of you might not know. He decided to introduce himself as Chris, son of Uther Pendragon from the castle of Camelot, king of the Britons, defeater of the Saxons, and sovereign of all England. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
That's good.
Yeah, say Shat Films is like what I call my new channel now, but I might change the name again in a week. So
whatever works.
Yeah. So yeah.
All
so
right.
I guess what we talk about is like I was going to do blogs about
Mm-hmm.
some of these subjects, and then I disabled my website. Like I still own the site, but it's just disabled. And I decided not to write blogs because it was like getting in the way of other things I was doing. And also I wasn't sure if anyone was reading them. So
it is kind of hard to tell if somebody's actually reading them.
Yeah. I wrote like a 5,000 word blog about prostitution. And it was about like epistemology when it comes to like feminism. And I went through and I just took like, I divided 4 different main schools of feminism in that blog. I don't know if you ever read it, but I just, as far as like debating it, I said like libertarian or whatever you want to call it, free market feminism, and then like liberal sex positive feminism, radical feminism, and socialist and Marxist feminism. And I went through like how their views differ, and that affects how they view prostitution. So I went through all 4 of those, and then people on Twitter were just like, people who are on the like the anti side and people who are on the pro side just straw man the fuck out of it. Like both of them saw it as like a negative, and there hardly anyone commented on it at all. But like the people who did, it was just like complete straw man.
There's this sort of like need when you have a particular like ideological standpoint that you're standing with, regardless of what your epistemology is supposed to be and what you're supposed to remain consistent with. What you end up doing is sort of scanning articles that are talking about a controversial issue, and you just try and kind of look for the general tone of the article. Like, okay, are they for it? Are they against it? What's going on? And like, there's little desire to read into the nuance of articles like that, I find, on the sort of internet scale of reading stuff like that. So I like when I read it, I read through it. I couldn't quote anything from it to save my life. It was a while back when I read it, but yeah, it was really long. But when I read it, I had sort of neutral feelings about it, I guess, for the most part. The only thing that I really had any sort of an actual issue with was a thought experiment that you put into it, which was I think it was a woman and her landlord or something along those lines. Yeah. And when I looked at the thought experiment, I'm like, to me it didn't seem analogous to prostitution, and I discussed it with a few of my friends, and we came to our own conclusions.
Well, I had two versions of it too, though. One of them, like if you look at it this way, it's exactly like prostitution, or it's exactly like rape. But if you look at it this other way, it's like any other like decision you would make, like autonomous decision.
Because I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to probably watch this that haven't read it.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over it real quick?
Well, I mean, like I don't even remember how I really did it in the blog.
Yeah, if
I was like, a woman needs money and like for her rent, and her landlord, and like if her landlord extorts her for the money, and she has sex with her landlord to just live, and she doesn't want to have sex with her landlord, then that's like analogous to rape because she's being coerced into having sex and she doesn't want to. But if, say, like she needs the money, but she goes out and has sex with a man who's of her choosing, then that's different. And like what the point I was making though was about like, you notice that people who are pro legalization of prostitution, they emphasize the ability of sex workers to refuse anybody. Like that's an important thing. One of the things I think about though, that is when people just compare it to a service though, in other service industries, you don't have that ability. You don't have that ability to.
Yeah, it's more like it's more like the manager of the store or whatever store you're working at in the service industry. If they're going to refuse service to somebody, it's not really up to the worker. Like if you're a waiter or a waitress and you have like somebody at your table that you feel skeeved out about or you're not comfortable around, you can tell your manager about it. But if your manager decides, well, you're gonna have to serve them anyway, then you don't really have an option on that front.
Yeah, and I think if even people who are like really pro decriminalization and pro legalization, some of them wouldn't. Like some of the hardcore libertarians would just be like, "No, you're open for business. You have to serve everybody." Like, they might have to say that, but like really, I think that was one of the points I was using that I think to point the difference between libertarians and like liberal sex positive feminists, because like when you hear them make the arguments, it sounds like the same argument, but like these people like fundamentally have a difference about how they think about economics and how they think about like freedom. So like what's this difference and how it would affect prostitution, like how they would view prostitution. So that's what I was trying to get at. I was trying to like just rip it apart and like show you the difference between these four different.
Right, because like both sides of the argument when it comes to prostitution very much emphasize the sort of value over a woman's choice over what to do with her own body, right? But like one side decides that the choice being made is something that they're not actually choosing to do, and the other side is saying that they are choosing to do it, but they're giving like I don't know, a different context and explaining how it is a choice. But both of them have that value that they're operating from. They just see it from two vastly different perspectives.
Yeah, and that's the point I was making. And like radical feminists seem to just think full stop. It can't be an autonomous choice because men just have too much of a advantage because of patriarchy. And that's hard to argue because like really it's not, what is it based on? It's like based on just this perception of patriarchy. Like I don't agree with radical feminists on their like the basic, and I keep trying to define what a radical feminist is, and like online I find it very like it's that view on patriarchy is
there's too much. There's so many different levels to it. Like you get to there's some radical feminist positions that might seem fairly reasonable, but then you have other situations of radical feminists that just believe the craziest things. So
yeah,
it's hard
I'm talking about
delineate.
What is the key view that makes you a radical feminist? Like what is the demarcation like that makes you a radical feminist and not another kind of feminist? And that view on patriarchy seems to be the one that people, and not everybody says that, but like some people like just seem to think that's the demarcation. It's like you have this view of the patriarchy is a institution onto itself. It's not like a byproduct of capitalism or a byproduct of any other system. It is an institution onto itself for its own purpose. And that premise I find very dubious. And like, so like that's, but like I do have sympathies for a lot of things that radical feminists argue. Which is one of the problems, like when I talk about online, like people don't really realize what I'm talking about. I'm talking about is like, yeah, have you ever made an argument to somebody and then they assume what all your ideology is just based on that one argument?
Yeah.
Like that, like that's what happens online all the time. It happens to me sometimes in person. It's happened to me in like academics too, like in classes and stuff where I was arguing with someone. Like it happened to me all the time because I would make arguments about religion and then people would assume I'm religious on YouTube. It would happen all the time. Because if you don't agree 100% with what Sam Harris says or Richard Dawkins says, then you're a Christian. If you're white, and if you're another color, you're probably Muslim. But
if you're one of the darker colors, then you're probably from one of the Middle Eastern places. The internet's crazy.
Yeah, like that's how it is. And I know, like, you cannot discuss, like, I got dogpiled like a while back because I said I was going to go on Twitter and I was going to just disagree with some feminists or something. And like, it's the first thing I found that like you could disagree with, and it's not really, it's something feminists disagree on. So I wasn't like making an MRA type argument. I was like prostitution. So I wanted to talk about like what makes a free autonomous choice, which is really what the argument of prostitution is. That's why I see as the argument. It's like these different kinds of feminists have different ideas of what makes an autonomous choice. So I decided and got dogpiled. even though everything I was saying was completely reasonable. Like it was just, and it was amazing to me. And like the men were the worst. Like the men, you're on camera right now.
Okay.
You're broadcasting out to like millions of people. Anyway.
Yeah, like all 12 viewers.
Yeah, dozens of people. 1 dozen. A big dozen at the most.
Whoever's gonna watch it afterwards anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. But where was I? Oh yeah, I just got dogpiled over this, and I was just like, yeah, this is insane. Like, what's the point if you're not gonna argue people? And that's what, like, I follow a lot of feminists on Twitter, and like they just assert things. Like, and Twitter's like real short. There's no arguments or anything, but what's the point? It's like, because either people are gonna go, oh yes, I agree with that, or they're gonna go, I don't agree with that. But then there's no arguing about it or discussion about it, which is why I think like your approach to YouTube is better. And I think you should just kind of just ignore the comments for the most part. Like if people make like really good comments, like ignore the comment. Like be really selective about comments that you respond to, because most of them aren't going to be worth your time. Because people just live in it, like people just like there's Salman Rushdie. I was reading an article about Salman Rushdie. He's talking about his new book being controversial because his first novel in like 7 years, and his books usually are controversial because they address like religion and things like that. And he's just like, yeah, we live in an age where everyone's angry all the time. He's like, just look at the internet.
I like being angry. It's a fun thing to be angry with people. It makes you feel alive.
So he's just like, you can't focus on that. You just have to do, because like before like the big thing with me happened, I actually was going to have 3 channels pretty much, or like 2 channels in a blog, and it was like I was trying to be everything to everyone. Mm-hmm. And it's impossible. Like what I was doing, and I was trying to do what I want to do, and like Salman Rushdie's like, you need to do what you want to do and just ignore everybody. And like the people who are most successful on YouTube, that's what they do. I noticed that. Like, it's like it's stupid to have like a community, a social community on YouTube. It's just dumb. Because we see what happened. It's just Machiavellian backstabbing. And like there's new drama today. I'm not even going to bring it up.
Even if you have like a group of friends and you're like, okay, so we're all going to agree not to backstab each other, right? And then it happens anyway.
Well, that was what my group was literally agreed not to backstab each other. And then 2 people, decided they were going to go crazy. And then some people went with them because they thought they were the higher, and not going to bring up names, but you were in that group. And it's like, those people said I backstabbed them. And I'm like, how? How did that happen?
It does seem to be just sort of a fundamental nature of the internet. It's so weird how much people just need to fight so much. Like, I kind of get it on some level because there is an entertainment value in not just watching people fight, but sometimes actually participating in it as well. Like what I said before was a little flippant, but it does kind of feel like it gives you a sense of purpose to like very voraciously go after people that you vehemently disagree with about whatever thing. But sometimes it's not even about that. Sometimes it's just about personal drama, which is just the weirdest thing to bring up to me on YouTube, because personal drama on YouTube, like, I don't know. It just seems weird.
Did you ever notice that like when I was making videos, I made very, very strong, rigorous argumentation videos when people agreed with me, and when they didn't agree with me, I was a strawmanning liar who quote mines everyone, and like literally, like sometimes the same people, like literally, like they were like the people who most hate me now, and I've made enemies, like, or some of them are the people
biggest fans in the beginning.
Yeah, they were most sycophantic about me, and like that's weird, and that tells you like these are people who see the world in black and white. That's why they're like that. Because the minute like I didn't like live up to their idealized version of me, they turned on me. And I was trying to explain that to somebody, and I was like, they were literally saying that if I was on the outside, I would be criticizing me. And I'm like, no, like I know who I am better than you know who I am. Yeah. Like that's what's insane about, like, people are telling me stuff about me, like people are telling me stuff about my private life that people are analyzing a relationship that I had with a person whose real name is unknown. My real name is known on the internet, whose real name is unknown. The only reason you even know this person knew me in real life at any point is because I've admitted it. And like, you think you're going to get answers about that. How? Like, you're not. Which I'll talk about like that later. We've already got like kind of gone way off structure.
We had like a small list of things that we were going to actually talk about, but you know, we've already been bullshitting for a little while. I think we should probably get started on the first thing because it sort of leads into the rest.
Like we've already really touched on prostitution, so we don't really need to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We could get into it further if you want to later, but
I want to use that as an example of like something that is really like the first problem. Mm-hmm. And the problem is like feminism is very broad. Mm-hmm. So when people are arguing online, like what kind of feminist you are is actually kind of important in terms, like that's what I'm talking about. Someone says they're a feminist, then someone assumes they know everything this person believes based on whatever their like weird straw man version of feminism is. Yeah. Like you could say people do that with MRAs. I'm sure MRAs feel that way. They're like, if they say they're an MRA, or if people who say I'm not an MRA, but people like they say, well, I'm not an MRA, but people assume they know all their stances too because they might agree with MRA on certain things. I agree with MRAs on certain things, like kind of abstractly, like circumcision and things like that. But like, if I said that, you wouldn't immediately think that I, think street harassment is okay.
Yeah. No big deal.
Yeah, completely unconnected things, mm-hmm. Which tends to be what happens. So like that's a problem. And the definition that people use about feminism, like usually online, there are some feminists who reject this definition, by the way, and some of them online who reject it. The most common one is like, well, if you believe in gender equality, you're a feminist. Then the anti-feminists say, well, I'm not a feminist, I'm a gender egalitarian. Now, if the definition of feminism is belief in gender equality, then gender egalitarian means the fucking same thing as feminist. They will sit and have a semantic argument about like the feminist saying, I'm not a gender egalitarian, here's why. And the gender egalitarian saying, I'm not a feminist and here's why. They will never touch on their differences in views ever. It's completely a semantic argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
like,
is.
Why do you want to have that argument? That's not, and then there's just the thing is like, what you have to assume, here's why I think it's problematic to say, and I know the dictionary defines it this way, but appeal to the dictionary is flawed because words evolve, and all dictionaries say is what people who write dictionaries think. And the reason it's flawed from like a point of view of arguing is we're assuming that equality is like an objective thing, right? Like it's an objective thing. Gender equality is an objective thing. So there is one correct version of that.
There's an imaginable standard to live up to that would entail that happening. Yeah, and then we can derive that standard from inferences of what exactly we mean when we say equality among the genders. So yeah, I would totally agree. There's an objective standard we're trying to get to.
Yeah. So when feminists disagree with each other, that means one of them is being feminist and one of them is not. Now, here's the problem with this is that like when I disagree about equality, like the definition of equality, and like when we got into the prostitution discussion, that's another thing. It's like your definition of equality is one of the things that separates these different schools of feminism. A libertarian has a totally different view on equality than a socialist. Mm. And like there are people who call themselves libertarian feminists. There's people who are socialist and Marxist feminists. So they have like totally different views on equality. Now, is one of them right and one of them wrong? This is the discussion to have. But that means like I did this before though. I was like, oh, those people aren't feminists because they don't share my view on equality because I was accepting this view. Now, the problem with that is like I'm a man. And like I don't feel comfortable like telling women who have like a different view of equality that they're not feminists anymore. That's one of the problems with it. But also I'm just sick of the argument being over who's the real feminist and this being like this total mudslinging, stupid fight. Now, if you want to argue over what the definition of equality is, yes, that's part of it. So like if you make it, and it's not women's rights, like not advocacy for women's rights, advocacy for women's interests. And here's why this like fixes a lot of stuff we have in a lot of the semantic battles, because guys like Justin Carr will be like, well, see, they say like if you want to be a feminist and you're a man, you have to like take your cues from women. Well, that's obviously shows they don't believe in equality. And that's just a semantic argument.
Right. Yeah.
But that's all it is. Now to advocating for interest is part of equality, though, because especially if you define equality the way I do, which is like equal consideration. So like, yeah, I can't advocate for an interest for a group I don't belong to properly. I can be an ally to that group, but I don't really know what their lives are like on a daily basis. And just like we separate by like class, like economic class and things like that, cis and trans people experience life differently, things like that, different racial groups. You can't really advocate effectively for a group you don't belong to because you don't really completely understand their experience. Now, once you to get to like raw information, you need that. So like when
I think it is, and this might go off the rails, but I think it is possible to advocate for a group that you're not a part of effectively, in the form of understanding a coherent and cogent system of not only rights but also obligations. And
yeah, you can't do so independently of them, is what I'm like really arguing. Like independently of them, like just through thought.
You have to take their considerations into account, but I'm saying something along the lines like, like abortion rights, for instance. That's something that you can come to the conclusion that it's simply better for a woman to have the right to do, despite not being one, just on the basis of bodily integrity.
People don't agree. People don't agree on rights as well.
Well, that's true.
So that's another thing people don't agree on.
But I believe both of us are also moral realists, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So it's not, while people can disagree on things, that all that means to me is that, well, that just means some people are wrong and some people are more probably right.
Well, I'm talking about definitions in terms of communication. So I'm not talking about definitions.
Okay, all right, yeah.
That's more accurate. Like, and I see like just defining as gender equality as a dead end in terms of communication. If you define it as advocacy for women's interests, then anyone who calls themselves a feminist, who's a woman, is a feminist. The unfortunate byproduct of this is that men cannot be feminists, which very upset Captain Andy, who says that he doesn't do it for the brownie points or the cookies, even though he was very, very upset. There was actually like a radical feminist who wrote a blog once where she was like talking about like why she's suspicious of male allies, and she was like, how would you react if women said that men couldn't be feminists? And if you throw a hissy fit about it, then you're not really advocating for women. And I like totally agree with that.
Like, you're advocating for women either way, even if you're not allowed to use the label. I mean, that's
like I didn't agree with most of what she said in that blog, but I was like, yeah, like these men who throw a hissy fit because they want the label feminist. It's like, because I've never given a shit. And in fact, I was like, don't call me that because I don't want my channel labeled that. And it just got labeled that anyway. And it was driving me nuts. But because the reason being, once someone labels you with that, they think they can infer all your positions from that label. And I didn't like that. So that's a problem with it. Some people would say that makes all women feminists because all women are advocating for their own interests. But it's possible to be a woman and advocate for like a patriarchal position because it benefits you. Like a lot of rich women do this a lot. They advocate for like the boys' club of corporate America.
Something we were talking about before is the problem of like people arguing about who's real feminist, who's not a real feminist, that kind of stuff. If that's, I don't know if changing the word feminist to mean an advocation of women's interests would really help with that problem so much. And you're going over it now with, every woman is advocating for at least their own interests, and they're women, so
Yeah.
technical basis. But at the same time,
yeah, but are they advocating for their interests because they're women? Like, that's how you would break it out. If like someone's advocating, like they're advocating an interest that they share with women. Like, this is the problem that we have, like with, like, say, white feminists excluding women of color, because they're just like, well, all women experience the world the way I experience it because I'm a woman. But that's not true, because there's other categories. So they are advocating for what they see as women's interests.
I see a good avenue here to go into another subject that you want to talk about, which would be trans rights. Because we still, as far as I'm concerned, we still have the problem of TERFs, for instance, even including this, and that's the notion of if a trans woman who is still in the body that they don't want to be in calls themselves a feminist, like, would they be allowed to do that? Yeah. And a TERF would say no, because they're not really a woman.
I'm using the term woman. When I use the term woman, it means gender, not sex. That's how I'm using it. There's a Joanna Russ science fiction novel. It's called the Female Man. And like what that means is like female is the sex, man is the gender. So it's basically like referring to almost a trans person, even though it's not explicitly like stated within the text. But like that's what it's really talking about. And like that's when I say woman or man, I'm talking about gender. If I say male or female, I'm talking about sex, biological sex, which also isn't like a strict binary either, and problematic, especially when you're talking about like transitioning to like that starts to become problematic, because like hormones are part of what we define as biological sex, and then genital sex, and then chromosomes and like stuff like that. But like for the purposes when I say women, I mean gender. And that's why when I got in the argument with Captain Andy, and he said like, well, can non-binary people be? And I said, no, they can't, because they don't identify themselves as a gender. I mean, like you can say that non-binary and agender is a gender the same way atheism is religion, but like it doesn't make, and like his arguments like he was making were just silly. Like he was like, oh, as long as the trans community considers them a gender. I was like, no, because there's no progress if you're like, well, as long as the authority that I recognize says this, I believe this. It's like, as long as the Pope says this, I believe this. That's like, it's exactly right.
That's very counterproductive to any sort of actual understanding of the mechanisms that were or even the framework, honestly. It
also assumes that like all trans people agree, like all black people agree.
That in itself is somewhat offensive. Like, if the trans community says this, well, what are you talking about? The trans community is just...
Well, it's a democracy. They get together and vote, and if you don't agree...
They all get these little pieces of paper in the mail. Oh, we're holding a vote today on non-binary people. Okay.
I said, no, they can't. They can't be feminists like properly, because like they're just like, they're like, fuck this whole gender thing. So that's just how they are, and that doesn't mean that they can't advocate for feminist causes. And like there is a problem. There's a bigger problem with trans men, because like the thing is that radical feminists like to define woman. They basically define woman, even though they are like most hardcore about gender being a construct. They define woman like by biology, which is weird, because they're the ones who are like, it's totally 100% a construct. A woman is a biological woman. It's like, what? It doesn't quite make sense. But like trans men, if they can still get pregnant and stuff, then that's part of like advocating. They share that with women, like a lot of women. Obviously not even all cis women, but they share. And like that's one of the problems with TERFs excluding trans women, because what are you excluding them from? Because they say it's because of the women face certain biological oppressions. And I can only assume they're talking about reproductive rights. Well, not all women even share that.
Yeah, there's plenty of infertile women out there. Like, that's the thing. So are these people not in the category of women in this sense?
Yeah.
And I asked that to somebody before, and they didn't really respond to me. They basically just said that I don't know what I'm talking about after I said that. I'm like, well, this is a legitimate point to bring up.
Like, all you gotta do is clarify. Like, clarify what you're saying. So, I mean, like that was one of the things, like arguing with Bewildered Ape, that pissed me off. Is like he always refuses to clarify anything. Like, he just will say, well, you can interpret my statement like this, or you can interpret like this. It's like when you're having a private fucking conversation, he does that. Like, it was okay to me. It was already problematic when he was doing it in the comment section. When he's talking about his videos, it's not really problematic. When he's doing it in the comment section, it becomes more problematic. When he's doing it in a private Twitter conversation, there's a fucking problem. And it's like, yeah, like I just gave up on him at that point. I'm like, I'm done. We're not gonna like have a discussion. And like, I understand what he says. Like, I totally agreed with what he said. He said this to Zenith. He's like, well, if I wanted to have a discussion, I would write a paper and then present it to my colleagues, so I wouldn't come on YouTube. And it's like, yeah, I totally agree with that. But then what are you doing here? Are you here just to harass and bully people? Because that's what 90% of people are here to do.
That's one way to have a discussion. There's another way to have a discussion, and if you want to engage in that, then that's fine. But that is a legitimate question. Like, if you're saying that you're not here to have a discussion, then clearly you're not here to do something that one would call productive, I would say.
Well, I thought what he was trying to do is make people think indirectly, and that's why I completely supported him. Because I was like, yes, this is an effective way, because you can't reason with these people. They're crazy. But you could like indirectly influence people in an interesting way. And that's what I thought he was doing. And perhaps that is what he was set out to do. But I think he has abandoned that at this point, whether he knows it or not. Because like I've watched his recent videos. We're getting like off topic, but I watched his videos.
I honestly, I don't know much about Bewildered Ape. And if he wants to clarify anything to me, he can go ahead and do so.
Yeah. But like recently, like he used to not really take a stand. He used to just be like an agnostic kind of. And now he takes a stand. So yeah, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I had to fucking.
Yeah. Like that. So that's why I think he like has abandoned it, because it seems like he's taking stands now. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know either. I don't speak to him anymore. I don't know about like clarifying what he's doing. As far as I know, like he's just like way ahead of all of us. And like we just don't understand anything he's doing. But I've given up on that. I don't 100% understand everything he was doing, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt before, and now I'm just like, no, like I've given up. So
I know that I'm not supposed to focus on negative stuff, but you know how you predicted there was going to be some negative comments?
Yeah,
they're pouring in.
And they'll come just to harass. Like they won't say anything. They won't say anything of substance because they have nothing. There's nothing of substance to say. So, and yeah, like I'm being targeted still. Like I'm being harassed. Like people said I was harassing people. It's been like a month since I've like really been, like since Sequester Zone was active. Like didn't I delete it over a month ago?
I don't remember when you deleted it. It feels like it's been longer.
Yeah, it feels like that, but I think it's been only like maybe a month and a half. Like still, like there's still like I'll comment on someone else's video and someone will write like eat shit and die. Like not even say regardless of what they say. I'll even say something that politically they agree with, criticizing someone they would criticize, and they'll write eat shit and die. And it's like, why would you do that? Like why would you write like why? The only reason you do that is
because you're the villain.
Because you believe in harassing people.
Yeah.
Like that's what you believe in.
Harassment is okay so long as I view you as a bad person.
Yeah. I'll show you like from my ex-girlfriend, I have a email that I forgot. And it's from like when we first started talking about this whole shit. I'll show you if you want to see it, where she literally argues that. Because I gave her a bunch of stuff. I was like, these people are lying about me. You know these things are lies. Why are you taking their side? And she just goes, I do not deny there are lies about you out there, but I know how you are. So she's basically saying, I think you're bad. So it's you deserve it. And then she proceeded to lie about me.
This again is another phenomenon that we find on the internet that we usually don't find in real life. Like that it's so strange how anonymity just does this to people where I guess it kind of works on both sides, where in the person who's anonymous can say whatever it is that they want with very little chance of anything happening to them. So they feel a little bit more like, I guess they have the right to do so. And then the other person is also considered anonymous, regardless of whether or not they know your name. There's a bunch of other stuff they don't know about you that you probably prefer they don't know about you. And so you're, regardless of knowing your first and last name and your face, you're still somewhat effectively a faceless villain that they can just say whatever the fuck about, you know? Like that's
that's how, like you realize I'm a human being, right? Like
no, you're not. You are the black-hearted entity known as Chris.
Well, you know, I killed like 30 hookers today.
Yeah, obviously.
I would have killed more.
Who doesn't do that on a day? Come on.
Yeah, I would have killed more, but it was a holiday.
Yeah. we're gonna get terrible comments with that.
I know. Well, like one of the things though is like people used to say to me, and like some of the people who attacked me said this to me. They were like, when they would have private conversations that were like unaired, they're like, "Oh, your sense of humor is so much darker, like in person, and like you say like these like things that like we wish you would be that way more in like your videos and stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I can't in this community. I can't. Like I already get enough stuff already about the jokes I do make," which is funny. Like I point out like some of the people who were supportive of me would be like, "You can never make a rape joke," and I was like, "Have you ever seen any of my videos? Because I make them all the time." Like I do, and it's like they just don't notice.
Yeah,
like
there's plenty of ways to make a rape joke funny.
Yeah, I did a montage of hateful rape apologist tweets with a swing version of Nirvana's "Rape Me" playing over it, and got no backlash. Like when I was editing that, I was like, I can't upload this. Like I was thinking,
but it went over great. Like no one had a problem with that.
Yeah, it was.
So there was clearly a humorous bent to it.
Yeah. So yeah, and like the thing is like rape like freaks me out, and the reason that it freaks me out is because of like stuff that personally happened to me, and then stuff that personally happened to people I know. So obviously that's like that freaks me out. And I don't know. There's a good documentary out called "Call Me Lucky," which is about Barry Crimmins, who was a comedian in the '80s, and he's a socialist, and he did like all these political stuff when it wasn't fashionable to do it, like in the '80s, especially like socialist stuff, like there's the Reagan era. But he was always really angry, and like they kind of like put this like as a mystery throughout the movie, but the trailer kind of gives it away. But he was always like really angry, like just angry about like oppression and like bad things. And it's kind of the same way I am, or was on YouTube, because people would always go, because I would lose it sometimes. Like he would lose it like in performance and stuff, and they show him like losing it, like a heckler will get out, and like he'd just go off. And he was actually like funnier when he was angry. Like one of the comedians actually says he's the only comedian I've ever seen who's funnier the angrier he gets. but he would go off on the heckler and like do all these jokes on the heckler. And as one of them is really funny because he's doing jokes on Reagan, and then the guy's like going, "Oh, would you support Carter then?" And like he starts doing all these Carter jokes, just like off the cuff too. Like he just makes them up like right there, and like they're really funny.
That's the hallmark of a really good comedian like that.
Yeah. But like the thing is, like the reason he was angry is like he was molested as a child, and like he had a lot of issues with that. And like when AOL first started and the internet first started, he started going online to find other survivors of abuse when he was a child. And instead he found like pedophiles trading porn. So he like testified before Congress and like became like an advocate for, you know, stricter restrictions on like what AOL could allow on there, to try to like stop pedophiles from trading on the internet. And that's what like the whole second half of the movie is about that. But when I was watching that, like I really related to this movie a lot, because like this guy's like, yeah, the reason he's so angry is, and the reason like he's always advocating for like people who have been through shit is because he's been through some shit in his life. So that's why he's like that. It's really good. Bobcat Goldthwait directed it, of all people. So
Bobcat, I have to watch it now.
Yeah, it's actually on YouTube. I watched it off of YouTube. I like purchased it off of YouTube, and watched it. It's like it's probably my second favorite documentary of the year. I haven't really watched a lot of documentaries this year, but
Yeah, I'm down on my documentaries myself. I need to watch some more. Ah, God damn it. All right.
But that said, like, I think that like segues into like let me give you like, I give you example. Like, people don't get this. Like, when it comes to like the rape debate, like the false accusation debate, like the problem with the MRAs is like they take like the atheist logic. They don't realize that absence of proof is not proof of absence, which is something that religious people say all the time, but they use it in a totally different context. But like when you're talking about a crime, yes, absence of proof or even absence of evidence is not proof of something not happening. Like, someone could be raped, and there's no evidence.
It's quite like rape is one of the most notorious crimes of being incredibly hard to prove, because it's very little unless you have DNA evidence.
On the other hand, I see feminists literally argue that if someone's accused, you should assume they're guilty.
Yeah.
I've seen this over and over again.
To be clear, like I've made my video in the past where I took the argument to mean something entirely different from apparently how a decent amount of people that I've seen anyway use it, which is the whole listen and believe thing. When I always took that to mean that you should just always believe that the person who's reporting whatever happened to them isn't a big fat liar, basically.
Yeah.
Not that the person they're accusing of having done something has in fact done it, just that the person who is talking about stuff, like through their perspective, something may have happened, and it may or may not have happened. You don't.
Yeah, like some people accuse people of crimes because they're mentally ill, but they still believe it happened. Like, yeah, too. Like, and something like that. I'll give you an example. You guys are arguing with somebody. Like, I think this is a really good example. Like, Woody Allen was accused of rape. He was accused of raping his adopted daughter. She accused him, like, she put out an open letter in the New York Times. She accused him of this. Now, what Woody Allen says is that after, like, the divorce from Mia Farrow, like, she brainwashed his kids against him. That's what he says. Now, people will be like, that's gaslighting. That's what they'll say, because that is impossible to have happened, apparently. Except that we know kids can be brainwashed to believe that they were actually raped and molested.
It's actually a very common concern between parents who have kids that are either going through either a divorce or some sort of problem. Is they're always worried that the other parent is going to start filling the kids' heads with like weird ass ideas as to the other parent. Like, that happened with myself when my parents got divorced. It happened with one of my friends when his parents got divorced. I mean, at least one adult in the whole thing would express some sort of concern that the other one is going to start spreading lies about the other guy or the woman. Like, it's a common complaint that shit, it can happen, especially when your kids are still really young, because they are impressionable and they can start being convinced that something happened even if it didn't.
Yeah, well, they know they can be convinced because of like the witch hunts in the 80s, like the pedophile witch hunts, like the McMartin trial and stuff like that. We know that they put kids under hypnosis in some cases, which we know like will create false memories, not actually make you remember better, and stuff like that. But like the Woody Allen thing, like the evidence that Woody Allen might have done this is somewhat compelling, because he's obviously someone who has like boundary issues. He is currently in a relationship with his ex-wife's adopted daughter, who was not his daughter, but was siblings basically with kids they adopted together. And apparently started relations with her where she was still a teenager, still a minor. So like that's a compelling reason to believe he might do something like that. Is that proof he did something like that? No. And like I would see like people, I've seen feminist articles about Woody Allen where and like I have a problem with this. They've analyzed his movies and said that he did this because of his movies. I'm like, are you crazy? They're like, look at Manhattan. Like Manhattan's a movie where his character is dating a teenager, but it's not portrayed positively that he's dating a teenager in that movie. In fact, like kind of the point is the teenager is more mature than his character. At the end, she ends their relationship and she's like, yeah, we're not meant to be together. And he's just like clueless. And that's kind of the point. But like, they're like, yeah, like, look, but she was not a teenager when he did this. She was like prepubescent child, which just because even if somebody does have like a teenager like fetish, which I don't like necessarily approve of, that doesn't mean that they'll rape a prepubescent child. And another thing I saw like someone went through, because people would bring up, well, the police interviewed her and they didn't find any compelling evidence. And they bring up like, well, now the way we interview children is totally different, which is true. And it's better now. That also doesn't mean anything. It means that, once again, it means that just because the cops couldn't find any evidence or compelling evidence, also Woody Allen's rich. So like keep that in mind. Like rich people very rarely get prosecuted for crimes that poor people would have. And just because that does not mean that he did it. Like they're like trying to turn it on its head. It's like the fact that the police didn't find any evidence is evidence that he did it. It's like what? And like that's going on.
It means that he worked really hard to get rid of all the evidence. That makes him the worst person.
My friend who is a feminist, we managed to have this argument without backstabbing each other and without deleting each other from Facebook. It's amazing. But my friend is a feminist who kept like posting these articles. Like I finally was just like, look, like logically speaking, these articles don't prove anything. All they say is like, it's not impossible he raped her. That's all they say. Like they don't say it's more likely that he did. They don't say like any of that. And then I brought this up to her. Mia Farrow supports Roman Polanski. And like that was like something that she found compelling. Like, because she even found like, I have a problem with taking out an open letter against somebody in a newspaper and then attacking people who worked with them who like are not, which is what she did. Like she was like, name people like Scarlett Johansson, Alec Baldwin. It's like, you're enabling him because you were in his movie that he directed. And like, so I have a problem with that. And she like got real mad at me for having a problem with that. I was like, I don't see why anyone like logical person wouldn't have a problem with that. It's like shaming people who have nothing to fucking do with it. They just like feel that they don't know one way or the other and they're not going to demonize a person for it.
Just from personal experience that happened with me and you. Like when everything started going down with you, I was one of the people that people were questioning, like, do you know about this? Do you know about this? And I was being told that I supported basically a terrible person because I wasn't going to, and I told you and everybody else involved in that, I'm like, don't get me involved. I have no interest in dealing with all of this because I don't know everything. I don't know the whole situation. And B, because of that, I just didn't want to deal with answering a question that I had some information on and then having that come back to bite me in the ass. I had no interest in that. And I still have people.
Yeah, what I should have done, first of all, so I should have made a video, very short video. Say I was accused of doing this to JJ, which is what it was. And apparently some other person who is unnamed, who people say was not the person who obviously I think it was. And if it was that person, who else did it come from? But whatever. Like, I'm accused of doing this. I didn't do it. It's bullshit. And then left it at that. Refused to ever follow up with it. People were writing me personal messages like, I would like to support you, but you're going to have to like answer this thing that this person said about you. It was like, what? Like, I have to answer, like, I have to convince you. And that was the problem. My problem was giving a shit, not realizing these people don't see me as
say you do get accused of something and that's something that you didn't do, and other people are saying, well, I'll support you so long as you can demonstrate that. Well, what you're asking me to do is prove a negative of something that's already hard to prove actually happened in the first place.
Yeah, I was saying that to Jenny, and like she's just like I don't know, it's like her brain's a bag of cats. That's what you know. It's like, and that's why I made fun of her for like the skeptic shirt and like the video response I made to her, which people don't get. Is like, yeah, it's like you're not a skeptic. Like, not even close. And like most of these atheists are not skeptics. Like Rebecca Watson, when she did like the thing about the old Quran, like it cracked me up because she made sure that you knew that even though she was arguing that this Quran was not older than Muhammad, that you knew that she 100% knows that Muhammad did not receive divine revelation because she was there and she spoke to God and he told her he didn't exist. So she knows. like she literally says she knows 100%. Like, and she goes, some people believe it and they're wrong. And I was like, yeah, that's like the craziest thing. And it's like, you're being like so good by criticizing dogmatic atheists, and then you make a dogmatic atheist statement at the front of it. It was like, really, humorous to me. But like going back to like the Mia Farrow thing, Mia Farrow supports Roman Polanski, who is a rapist. There is no doubt about him being a rapist. Just like I'm 99% sure Bill Cosby is a rapist. Like I'm 99% sure.
I'm pretty much in that camp as well.
Yeah. So, and Roman Polanski, I'm like 100% sure because he basically admitted to having sex with this girl who was 13, gave her alcohol, gave her a Quaalude, and then he's like, but it was consensual.
Yeah, like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Mia Farrow's statement about that was that Roman Polanski is a victim of America's puritanical values. That you can't drug and have sex with 13-year-olds when you're like 40. We're so puritanical over here in Europe. They're fine with that. And that's what she said. And I couldn't find a tape of that. She said it on the E! True Hollywood story years ago. I can't find a tape of it online because I was trying to show it to my friend, but I did find that she testified in Roman Polanski's behalf recently in like a copyright dispute or something like that in Europe. And she came and testified on his behalf. And like the fact that she would do that, because you can't be subpoenaed to do that. Like it's one of the things that you would have to do voluntarily. It's not a criminal thing, it's a civil thing. So the fact that she's still chummy with him tells you she doesn't think he's a rapist at all. He's without a doubt a rapist. So how does someone even like assume that her daughter was raped? How does somebody reconcile that in their head? And like when I think about that, I'm just like, yeah, the story Woody Allen tells sounds plausible to me. Now, do I believe it? No, not 100%. But I don't believe that he necessarily did it 100% either. And like I'm fine with that not knowing. Like if I had more information, and like I won't pay money to see Roman Polanski movies because of that. Like, but I'll pay money to see a Woody Allen movie. And I'm fine with it because I'm not supporting things he does by going to see a movie he made. I don't go see Roman Polanski movies partially because everything he's made since Test, in my opinion, has sucked, including The Pianist. But you know, like I literally like avoid giving him money to things that he's involved in. So like I don't have a problem with you avoiding giving money to people, but avoiding giving money to somebody or like any kind of support to them because they might have done something that there's no evidence for is ludicrous.
Or that they're associated with somebody that might have done something there's no evidence for.
Yeah.
That's more ludicrous.
Well, somebody tweeted, and you could probably figure out who it was. I'm not going to name the name of the person, but they tweeted, they're like, I respect somebody who says I don't have enough information to know either way, but if you're supporting somebody who's accused of abuse, you're enabling their abuse. Like they literally say, well, if they're accused, they're guilty, so don't enable them. It's like how could you say that? Like you're not even trying to hide what you're saying. So it was amazing to me. And I just don't give a shit. Like, I don't really give a shit. Like, I actually needed the Patreon money when I started the Patreon. I don't anymore.
Right.
Like, I actually need it when I started. And like, people are like, oh, he needs every dollar from that Patreon. I was like, I don't give a shit. If Bewildered Ape had come to me and said, look, I have some reservations. I don't want to give you Patreon money anymore. But they're my personal reservations. I would be like, I understand. And then, like, that would be it. Like, because what am I going to say? It's like, no, you have to give me $10 a month.
Yeah, you have to pay money.
Like, what am I going to say to him? Like, because he even like lowered his Patreon donation he was giving to me prior to that and told me about it, and I was like, "It's no big deal." I was like, "It's no big deal. Like, you can do with your money what you want." I was like, "I probably wouldn't even notice right away." Like, to tell you the truth, like it tells me in my inbox that and I don't really notice what's going on Patreon that much. But I was like, "Yeah, it's like, why couldn't you be an adult? It's like, why can't anybody be a fucking adult on YouTube?" So
we've been talking about the drama a lot, which originally said we were going to try to avoid.
Well, I'll get back on like the topic though. Did you hear what happened with like Louis C.K.? Like it's not become a big thing, but it like kind of happened on the internet. You can find stuff about it. Louis C.K. has been accused of sexually harassing women. This started because Jen Kirkman was on a podcast, and she said there was a male comedian that she did not want to tour with. And she said because he makes her uncomfortable. And she kind of said some things to describe him in a way that, like, she basically said that described him as like a filmmaker and stuff like that, and like in ways that like kind of sound like she was describing Louis C.K.'s show. And people assumed it was Louis C.K. Okay, so what happens is this guy he's a male comedian. He claims that he had a story from 2 female comedians that he knows who said that they smoked weed with Louis C.K. or invited him over to like their hotel room when they're like playing like a show in the same place, or I don't know if they were touring with him. I don't know. It could have been years ago. It could have been like last year. It could have been like way before Louis C.K. was famous. Who knows? They said they invite him to the hotel room. He comes in. They like offer him some weed, and he says no. But you mind if I whip my dick out? And they said, oh, we just thought he was joking, so we just went okay. And then he just started masturbating in front of them. They tried to leave, and then he stood in front of the door and wouldn't let them leave. This is the story about it. I saw like this posted. This guy claims this. The website that covered this story, they like mentioned like the Jen Kirkman thing, and like the guy said that he's coming forward the story because Jen Kirkman. It sounds like the guy is like just a no-name comedian, and he thought like maybe someone will pick up on this and I'll become famous because he doesn't identify who the female comedians who this supposedly was done to though. So this is like a third-party story, like too.
I heard something from a person who heard something from a person stuff right now.
Yeah, and the guy from the website, like in the comments, people are like, "Oh, I've heard this about Louis C.K. for years," and then like people like Louis C.K. has always been creepy, and like all this stuff in the comment section. And then some people are like, "Yeah, I heard about him doing this to someone else," or like he did this to someone I know, and like stuff like this. And then I kept seeing the guy from the website who wrote the story, and he's like, would you like to say it? Come and talk to me. It'll be off the record. I won't identify who you are. And they just go, nope. Like every single time they refuse. It's like, you won't talk off the record about it to a guy, but you're like, right. You are talking on the record now. You're on the phone section.
Like, you're already doing it. You're already talking about it, but you don't want to make it. You won't want to give any specifics as to the situation. That's odd. That's a very odd thing to do.
So like what happened was Jen Kirkman was then asked about this allegation, and she had to like backpedal back, and she's like, this comedian, she said, like, it's obvious who I was talking about. So obviously it was Louis C.K. because that's who everyone assumed it was. And she goes, it was obvious who I was talking about. She said, one time he and I are performing together. He came up to me backstage. He said something creepy to me. Then he realized I was offended and said, sorry if that offended you. And I said, no, you're a creep. Own it, is what she said to him. And she says that's why she doesn't want to play, which we don't even know. She wouldn't even say what he said. So like it could have just been something that she found creepy that other people wouldn't have found creepy. Who knows? And she's allowed to find things creepy that she wants to find creepy. But she said, I wasn't sexually assaulted by this person. They didn't sexually harass me. They didn't do any of this stuff. I just am uncomfortable around this person for whatever reason. Which she's allowed to be uncomfortable. Like she's allowed to play shows with whoever she wants. And like, but that's like, these people were comfortable on that. These people were lying. They were just making something up. There's no way I believe that people are willing to say in the comment section that this happened to them or somebody they knew and then not speak off the record about it. Because you're speaking on the record now. Like someone can trace and find out where your IP address, if they're a hacker, and find out where you are based on like you putting that on the internet. So yeah, it's like, it's ridiculous. Like people are comfortable lying. Like I found it out. People are just totally comfortable. They're like, yeah.
It's fine when you have an established villain to lie about them. That's what it is. Like as soon as the story breaks, and it's not like this isn't the first time I've heard about this particular phenomenon happening. As soon as a story breaks about somebody having potentially done something that's not even specified, it just snowballs from there. And that person becomes the villain of the saga of whatever's going on. And then it's full carte blanche to say whatever the fuck you want about them because everybody's against them anyway, so you're not going to get in trouble for it.
Yeah, like let's say, like when you're comparing it to like something like Bill Cosby. Like Bill Cosby has like so many women. They reported it years ago. This isn't like them coming forward now. There's like independent, Their stories are really similar. The MO is very similar. Now, let's say like out of those, like, what is it, 50 women now? I like heard it was 50 now. Like it's like something ridiculous.
I don't know. Like last I heard it was 20, but I haven't been keeping up. So
yeah, like somebody might be exaggerating to me, but like it's at least 30, I think now. But 37. I don't know. She thinks it's 37. I don't know, but like it's a lot. Like let's say 5 of them are lying. That still means he like raped 32 women. So I mean that's the thing. Is like somebody could be lying about somebody doing something that they actually did to somebody else. But, you know, how do you know? Like, that probably does happen. It's just like people who go to the police station and claim that they committed crimes. Like, that happens. People go to the police station, like, a crime's committed, like, and they're like, yeah, I committed it. And they're, like, mentally ill people who just want attention. They just come to the police station and say, yeah, I did. Like, that happens with everything. That's one of the things about, like MRAs want to say, like, false accusations, like, specifically for rape, like, are, like, 90%, which is ridiculous. You would have to believe, like, women just have no moral compass whatsoever as a gender for that to be true. But like, there's people on the other side who are just like, oh, yeah, they're either like, they exist, but who cares if those guys go to jail? It's more important to punish the real rapists than, when that's not how our justice system is set up. Our justice system is set up that it's more of a disservice of justice for someone to go to jail for it. Crime they're innocent of than it is for a guilty person. A guilty person walks away. It's true that they might commit it again, but that also means they might get caught again. Yeah. So I know that's shitty logic, but you know, like it's not like they're going to just get by scot-free. And if they don't commit the crime again, like is that the greatest miscarriage of justice? Which is a greater crime? Somebody commits a crime, gets off for it, never commits that crime again, so they actually aren't a danger to society. Or somebody didn't commit a crime and they go to jail for 40 years for it, which they wouldn't for rape, but like for murder they might. But like, which is great? Obviously, the person going to jail for 40 years for something they didn't do is a greater miscarriage of justice. You're more. That's what the thing is. Like, jail to Americans is not about rehabilitation. It's not about.
No, it's about putting people that we don't like away to a place.
Yeah, it's about revenge, and like that's not a good. It's like whatever his name is now, secular thought, or like that thing he said where he was just like, oh no, if they're really bad, you can put them in solitary confinement until they go insane.
Yeah, and that's how you justify the death penalty for so long. It's just like, wow, wouldn't it feel good to just know that justice has been served? You know, justice. Yeah,
it's like, sure, we kill like 5 innocent people a year, but we kill like 100 guilty people.
It's good. They all deserve it. And that's the most frustrating thing about people's views on jail. And that's, you know, I'm in favor of changing the jail system almost entirely, just overhauling the whole thing and just turning it, I suppose into more educational facilities and work facilities. It's better than just sticking you in a cell and then just not really having you do much for some unspecified amount of time, because you're not going to learn your lesson. Like right now, I work at a facility that helps with people in rehabilitation for drug use of all different sorts. And I find that even if the success rate on that isn't very good, which it's not, it's only like, I don't know, 1 out of every 20 walks out like and stays clean or something along those lines. At the very least, that's doing something. Like, I don't feel that jail really does that. In my experience, those who go to jail for crimes, even if they didn't commit the crime, and even if it's a small crime, generally what that does is it just encourages them to get worse over time.
Yeah. Jail does make people worse. It makes them more sophisticated criminals when they get out. That's really what it does. And like they can't, like, I was thinking of doing it on my other channel. There's a Fritz Lang film called You Only Live Once, which is a movie about ex-con played by Henry Fonda, and he gets out of jail and like he just can't go straight because he can't get a job. Like he can't get and you just watch him like try to get a job, like try to go straight over and over again. Like, no, we can't hire you. You have a record. And like you just watch him like get more and more desperate until he just goes back. And like some critics complain about the movie Ant-Man, like kind of touches on that, because like Scott Lang's an ex-con, he can't get a job. He works at Baskin Robbins, and like they find out that he's a ex-con, which has one of the funniest lines in the movie where he's like, "Oh, he found out," and he's like, "Baskin Robbins always finds out." But like they touched on that, and like some critics are angry that like it's like, yeah, that's a really important thing. Like you just use it as like a throwaway joke, but like it's a really important social issue that this movie could have touched on a little more. Which, you know, it's a superhero movie. What do you expect? but yeah, like that's what's wrong with our prison system. And like you see what's wrong with it is like that's the mentality that people have. Like the only reason the UK doesn't have the death penalty is because it's not because like the people don't want it, because the people want it. Like if they had a vote, the UK would have the death penalty. They have it because the rest of Europe doesn't want it. They want it, like they're in the European Union. Like the rest of Europe doesn't want them to have it. That's why they don't have it. They would have it totally if it was left up to a vote by the people. It's like over 60% of voters in the UK favor the death penalty. So they would have it. It's like it's people. It should be considered like just cruel and unusual to give people the death penalty, I think. Like some people are just fine. Like you hear like the supposed liberals over on the Young Turks, which like, always crack me up. When Cenk Uygur is just like, "Oh, I'd be fine with it as long as we could 100% know they were guilty."
I wouldn't even be fine with it in that sense. Like to me, the argument about the death penalty and if we might kill somebody who's not guilty. To me, that's one of the most ineffective arguments for me. I think there's a lot more stuff that you could say that's way better. It's not about that to me. It's about the sort of debasing of society in a way. Like, why are we placing ourselves on the same level as somebody who has committed a terrible act by then saying, "Well, now we get to kill you"? That to me does not smack of any sort of actual justice. Like
that's what Jimmy Dore says on the Young Turks. Like he's by far like the smartest person on that show, and he's a comedian. Like that's what's funny to me. It's like he's a comedian, and like he's by far the smartest. Like in terms of just like thinking about things. Like but he's just like, yeah, the reason we shouldn't have death penalty is because it hurts us. Like who cares about like the people who committed those crimes? It hurts us. That's why we shouldn't have it. So.
Well, that and a bunch of other practical reasons, like it's ungodly expensive.
Well, part of the reason it's expensive, though, is because you have to have a system of appeals to make sure you don't execute.
Yeah, and it's basically infinite appeal process once it's the death penalty. Like you can just keep appealing. And honestly, the funny thing is, you're actually more likely to get off if you're actually innocent of a crime if you're accused of the death penalty because of that infinite appeal system.
Yeah.
Than you are if you get, like, for instance, life in jail, because you don't have the same appeal system, which is just mind-boggling to me. But that aside, like it's ungodly expensive. It's routinely practiced in kind of a racist manner. It debases society. Like there's a bunch of other much stronger arguments to make against something like that. To me, anyway.
Yeah. Well, getting back on the topic we were talking about, like I did. I wanted to piss. Like I did a lot of things just to piss people off when like I started getting this big controversy, which I thought was funny. But like one of the things I did was I took that thing that I found, the study I found about false accusations from the FBI, and Exile did a like response to it and then mentions like something, and like it's from the FBI, it's from a .gov. Like there's no questioning like what this is. Like I didn't watch her stupid video because like if there's anybody who his brain is more like a bag of cats than Jenny McDermott at Exiled. But and she never responds to anything that's not drama. Drama happens in Exile, rises from her crypt and comes to like haunt the world with her ridiculous logical arguments. But anyway, like I put the thing from the FBI, and it's just like women are more likely to report a false crime. That's all it says. And I wanted to see how they would react to that, because it's irrefutable that women are more likely than men to report a false crime. Now, do people report false crimes very often? No, they don't. Not any crime. There's no crime that's like over like 10% of the claims are not burglary, like not like nothing. Like people don't report false crimes very often. It doesn't happen very often. It's like a very small percentage. But I wanted to see how they would respond just to the fact that women do it more than men. And of course, it was just complete denial. And like I did that to like prove a point. I was like, yeah, they're just as dogmatic as the MRAs. Like you present them with something that's irrefutable, and they just go, "You misogynist," and like that's what they do. So MRAs.
It's much better. Like for me, if I'm just given a statistic or something along those lines, I have other people who can read studies that are far more educated than I am as far as interpreting statistics and whether or not they were done correctly or anything along those lines. And if they come back and they say, yeah, this looks legitimate, then I accept it. Like that's just how an empiricist works, which most people in the debate claim to be, at least to some degree. But it just doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, and it actually doesn't matter that women report crimes more often than men.
Yeah, because again, it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, it doesn't affect, like that was the point, and I wanted to see like how they react to that, because it doesn't. That's why I didn't use it. Like that's why when I was doing the what's wrong for them, because it's not relevant. I was like, because if I just put this in here, the MRAs will just straw man this thing into like oblivion, and it's like there's no point in addressing this. It's irrelevant to the conversation of like. First of all, and like as I've mentioned more and more, like people who actually go to jail for rape who are innocent, it's usually false identifications, and they're usually black. Like they're almost always black. And part of the reason for that is because people have a harder time identifying people of a different race than them, and cops are racist. That's the two reasons that those things occur. That's why that happens. And even if you're falsely accused of rape, you're not likely to go to prison. Like this happens every once in a while. Someone does it and then they're like, oh, they admit to the falsely accusing them, and then but like you're not likely. However, the study does have actual descriptions of what they mean by false. And like the most common thing in the comments was people going, well, there's a difference between like a unsubstantiated claim and false claim. I was like, yeah, they go through that in the fucking thing if you bothered to read it for 10 seconds. At the top. It's like right at the top. And they give examples, and like you can find other sources too. One of the examples they give is like there was a custody battle and divorce between this couple. The woman asked the man to meet her in a parking garage. She then initiated sex with him in her car. Then she claimed he raped her. It was like all a ploy to get him out of the way so she could have custody of the kids. And get everything she wanted because he's in jail. Problem was there's a security camera there. So like when she claimed she was raped, they then looked at the security camera and they saw that she had initiated it, and it was obviously consensual. And she ended up going to jail and didn't get her kids. So like that's one of the examples they use. They have other examples too. It's like, yeah, this is what we mean by false claim. And like that's pretty cut and dry. I don't think like you can say
the notion that there exists just like no women out there who would ever do something like this. Like
yeah, that's
entirely unrealistic. Like, do you accept that men could possibly do something like this? If you do, then obviously women are the same at the very least.
Well, I point this out, and I've started pointing this out in my like movie videos too. Like the idea that women are like naturally like more like saintly or like more morally better is actually something that's supported by patriarchal.
It's benevolent sexism.
Yeah, it's a form of like they do that, and it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like it's from like kind of Judeo-Christian tradition too. It's like they tell men that they need to get married so because women are going to like tame your violent impulses or tame your bad impulses. That's one of the things they tell you. It's like it's from religion, and it's from like patriarchal literature. And that's why like something like a movie like Unforgiven like is questioning that. Like they're showing you an example of that, but then they're like ripping the cover off the myth, like the mythology, like they're doing the whole thing for the Western. And like you see that over and over again though. The idea like, yeah, that's supported by like religious texts and stuff like that. Like women, and I know there's the opposite of that, which is, like the Garden of Eden story. Some people read the Garden of Eden story like Eve was bad and like tempted Adam. There's like a million ways to interpret it that are not like that though. But like you see all kinds of different like when you're trying to unpack this stuff and you're trying to like understand this stuff, like there's just like this thorny web of views. That's why like I have like a problem with like saying like, well, this is the one true feminism, because like there's just this thorny web of things to.
Now,
and like I want to hear different viewpoints and not worry about which one's the one true feminism.
would you not say that the desire to sort of like redefine feminism in any one particular way, wouldn't that be an engaging in that argument of like the one true feminist, or who are the one true feminists? Like, isn't that?
I'm just saying, like in terms of like communication.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying it like in terms of communication. If you're advocating for women's interests, then I consider you a feminist, and that's actually more inclusive.
Yeah, but if the logical necessity of that is that if you're not actually a woman, then you wouldn't fall under that. I mean, I get what you're saying in the sense of somebody.
But why do men have to be feminists?
Well, like, it's not that you have to be. I mean, if I'm not a feminist, then I'm not a feminist. Whatever. I'm more just. It doesn't
change your views at all. That's one of the things. It's like the label doesn't change my views. Like that was one of the things that I was just so upset when people were like, "You're my favorite feminist channel." It's like, shouldn't your favorite feminist channel be a woman? Yeah. Like that. It pissed me off way more than like giving up the label feminist. Like, it's like your favorite feminist channel should be a fucking woman, because they're the ones who are like giving you a glimpse. Especially if you're a man, they're giving you a glimpse into what it's like to be a woman. Like they're not. I can't do that for you. Sorry.
Right.
It should not be a man. Like your favorite feminist channel should not be a man. You're doing it wrong if your favorite feminist channel is a man. And that's what they just like the drama. And I noticed like my channel's been copied a lot. You notice that people copy me a lot? Like they copy like my style, they copy like my jokes, like my but they always copy the worst things. They copy like how vicious I am. And they copy like the things that I'm actually sorry I did on YouTube now.
I'm not certain that they're copying you. That's something that's been around for a long time.
No, but I think there's people who like kind of copy me. Like I've noticed. Like there's people who've like they've stolen direct arguments and direct rhetorical devices and direct jokes from me. So like I don't want to name names because these people will go, I wasn't copying off of you, and I'll be like, I don't even have my videos anymore, but I've seen people even use clips that I've used, and I know they didn't find them on their own. They found my video, they looked at my links, they took that video, they used it in their video. People are gonna like now be in the comments going, "Oh, he's so arrogant," because I'm arrogant for everything. The funniest thing I ever like, somebody made an argument that I was arrogant, and their argument was he has Buffy hangouts on his new channel, and I was just like. There was nothing else there. And I just wanted to be like, where's the arrogance in that?
Yeah, it's like me being arrogant for wanting to have discussions, or something.
Like, he's so arrogant.
That accusation, I'd be confused as hell.
He's so arrogant he eats spaghetti.
I'm arrogant because I vape. That's my new arrogance. I've legit gotten that, by the way, both on the internet and in real life.
Well, what's funny about that is that they said he's so arrogant he has Buffy hangouts, and then they were like, they were like enough said or something like that. Like it's obvious why that would be an arrogant thing to do, is to have a hangout about a television show on your channel, and that specific television show. Like if it was about Rockford Files, no, it wouldn't be.
No, then you'd just be pretentious.
Yeah. So like that's what was just like I was like what like
due to the nature of the internet, like you can't win. As soon as you are already in that state where you're going to be like the villain in any particular aspect, regardless of what it is that you're the villain for, so long as you've been established as such, you are going to remain that, at least in the eyes of some people. That's just how it's going to be. And it never will change. Like Thunderfoot, for instance, tomorrow could just start becoming an uber like feminist, just start spouting off all the good, all the stuff that refutes everything that he said before. Start actually listening to people. Start actually being a reasonable person, and there will be a substantial population of people who will never forgive him and will continue to hate him till the day they die. Like that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, but I don't see that. I don't see that to be the case. Like, here's the obvious person. I was once having a conversation with Rob, Unseen Perfidy, about Diana Boston, and if you watch like Captain Andy's response to her, like, man, she's Diana Boston, he does not address her points. Instead, he says, well, she's transphobic, so she's wrong about this thing that I can't address. That's kind of what his thing is. And like, he just says, and the stupidest thing he says in there, which totally drove me nuts, was he goes, like, she uses women as a class, which is both how radical feminists would describe it, and it's how like Marxist feminists would describe it. And he goes, class is like what if you're like middle class or working class. I was like, no, asshole, those things are intertwined. And in fact, you're like using right-wing rhetoric right now by trying to separate.
It's not very intersectional to exclude women from being a part of class. Like,
yeah, it's like, it's absolutely, yeah. It's like, that was my exact argument. It's like, yeah, you're intersectional there. Like, it's absolutely stupid because it's just semantic. First of all, it's like, I don't like your language, so you're wrong. Instead of just being like trying to understand why you're using that language and what it means to you, which is what you should do if you're arguing in good faith. But like, he doesn't do that. So that drove me nuts. But like, I was talking with Rob about Diana Boston. He was like, I was like, look, like, you can't totally dismiss all her points just because she has some loathsome views. Like, you can't do that. And he goes, well, you have to understand, it's like, what if Thunderfoot, disappeared for a while and then came back and said he was wrong about everything and feminism, and then like you expect everyone to forgive him, and it's like, yeah, I expect everyone to. I was like, not like to like forget, like, just like, and not like be on his ass and still be critical of him and like watch what he does. But like, I would expect everyone to go, yeah, people can change, because what's the point of doing this if we're not doing it to change people? But the really ironic thing about Rob, of all people, making that argument is he used to be a big asshole on YouTube.
Rob used to be a huge like Rush Limbaugh conservative. Like, and by his own words, like, this is what he said about himself. He has changed over the course of his life ridiculously dramatically. And if Rob sees this, sorry, dude, but I'm gonna say this. His attitude about issues has not changed in the slightest. Is the difference? His positions change dramatically, but the way in which he approaches engaging with people about his positions has never changed.
I'll give you that's how the atheists are too. Like, a lot of them used to be religious, and their religious mindset has not changed. They're still black and white thinking. It's still like, it's exactly the same. And that's like the problem. And so I'm speaking specifically of the atheists on YouTube, not atheists in general. Because atheists I meet in real life, just like feminists I meet in real life, and just people in general in real life, are not these huge assholes that they are on the internet. And I don't think these people may not even be assholes in their regular life, just something about the internet. Because I noticed that the internet makes me a bigger asshole too. Just not quite as dramatically as some other people. But so like, you see this phenomenon that people become big assholes on the internet. But like, the same, like War Corpse, is all like nicer War Corpse was when you like debated him.
Yeah. You would be surprised. We actually would have like conversations prior to those debates too, like for like an hour. Because let's see.
I would get along with War Corpse. He doesn't see anything, so I would get along with him if I knew him in my regular life. Because the reason is because he's not, even if he said something stupid, it's just like, he's just saying something stupid. Like, it wouldn't be like he's broadcasting something stupid to like. But here's the thing. I used to think that people on YouTube was somehow relevant to anything, and it's not. And like, when I say that, it makes people mad, because people are like, because when I said the thing about like feminists I said online feminists, and I put in a bunch of caveats to say what I mean by online feminists. There was this young woman who was like, oh, you made such a generalization about feminists. I was like, no, I didn't. I caveated the shit out of that, and I said what I mean. And she goes, well, it's means everybody, because everyone's online in some sense. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking about academic feminists. Like one of my exes, and she follows me on Twitter, and I retweet her sometimes, was a gender studies major at Columbia. When I told her about all this shit going on, she was like, why would you ever engage with online feminists? This is like a gender studies major from Columbia. It's like they are some of the stupidest people ever. Like, don't engage with them. And she's not talking. She's of course not talking about with everyone online. She's just talking about what online.
Who predominantly and almost and sometimes solely either learn everything about from feminism online, or as well as solely advocate for feminism online. Like that's sort of where I believe that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
And like what I've said sarcastically is like they're 19-year-old girls who read a book about feminism once. That's what they are. And like like they're not experts. They're not like, and like my ex that I'm mentioning, she has like some views that some people might think are crazy. Like she thinks trigger warnings, like she has that view, like trigger warnings allow people to like avoid things when they should be processing them. And there are people in like those psychologists who believe that. So it's not like if you say that online, people act like you just said, you know, a racial slur or something. Like they just act like it's the craziest thing ever. And they like go nuts. Like you're a horrible person because you said trigger warnings might encourage people to avoid things they should be processing. And that's what there are psychologists who have that view. Like it's not a crazy view. It's not like 9/11 was an inside job. It's like a view that professionals in the mental health field, some of them have. It's not like the dominant view, but it's a view. And I've argued with her about it. And she's not like a crazy person. She's not like foaming at the mouth, just like she can argue for it. Like I don't agree with her, but she can argue for it. And like that's a very contrarian view. She was a gender studies major. So like obviously, you know, you don't have to like, that's the thing, is like people are like dogmatic. They're so dogmatic. They like want to have like eventually Captain Andy is going to like end up in just a room talking to himself because like that's where he's going with like how he's approaching things. Because if someone has a certain view, and he has expanded transphobia, like the definition of transphobia, to like be so broad, it's now like anytime you disagree with a trans person or say anything that's against the views of the trans community as he sees it, you're transphobic. Because like that thing that Dark Matter said, I don't agree with that thing Dark Matter said. I don't think it's transphobic. He wasn't denying the gender identity or expressing disgust.
Yeah, it was ignorant, but I wouldn't say it was bigoted.
Yeah, and it definitely wasn't transphobic. You're just like changing the definition to be so broad that like if you are expressing, and that was the thing with dead naming, like dead naming is dead naming if you're doing it to specifically hurt that person and deny their gender identity. It's not dead naming when you send somebody something in the mail because you have their old name. And like, though like trans people on their blogs will call it dead naming, which like makes me mad. But I can't get mad at them though. They're dealing with something difficult, but like, it makes me mad because like, let's get this discussion a little more nuanced. But like my mother couldn't get rid of my stepfather's last name for a long time. And that was distressing to her. So like, that's something totally different. And that's an example of somebody not being able to get rid of the name. They legally changed their name, but they just kept getting stuff with that name. And it would really upset her because she wants to forget this guy forever. So I've seen somebody go through that in a totally different way. So I understand like why that's annoying to you. These people aren't doing it to you on purpose. So like, I think like the term, if you're going to define it that broadly, it's kind of useless.
There is something to say. I wouldn't say that this entirely frames the debate, but there is something to say in the point that if somebody is not intending to offend in any way, it's kind of hard. I wouldn't say it's impossible to say that they're bigoted, because it's not, because somebody can be bigoted without knowing it. I think I truly believe.
Yeah, like I explained it with the ladies and gentlemen thing like this. If you meant to include everybody, then when you did it, there's no fault by you. When it's brought to your attention that it doesn't include everybody, and then you continue to do it, now the fault lies with you.
Right.
And I explained it like that. And then with the whole dead naming thing, then Captain Andy strawmanned that into me saying that intentions don't matter. And even though I corrected him and I saw other people correct him, he continued to use that straw man, which is what they do. That's what MRAs do. This is why like I have no respect for most of the people who like are in this community, this SJW community or feminist community on YouTube, because I've observed they're no better than MRAs. They think the same way. Yeah, like I happen to think they're right about more things, but they think exactly the same way.
You know,
so
what's really funny about this whole thing is that, by and large, if I looked at everybody who's on the side that we'll call the MRAs, and everybody who's on the side that we'll call the SJWs, if I looked at all of them and I just listened to them speak about things, I would probably more likely in real life get along with the people on the side of the MRAs. Honestly,
people didn't understand why. Like, I understand why Noel Plum upset certain people. Noel Plum is a decent human being. Like, and I cannot say that about like I'm not going to name the names of people, but you obviously probably know who I mean. Yeah. But like, there's at least 7 or 8 people on the SJW side I used to be friends with who I now believe just don't even understand common human decency, even when it's explained to them. Like, that you don't talk about somebody. I had somebody who was friends with me literally say, it's like, you were talking about me, you like said everything was okay, and then once I left the Skype group, you talked about me behind my back in the most vicious way in a Skype group you knew I could read later. And they said, what's wrong with that? I was like, really? Perhaps you should like see a psychologist because you might be a sociopath. Because like, if you don't see what's wrong, and this is the same person who's like talking about people's feelings all the time. I'm like, really? You think that's okay? Like, no one thinks that's okay. Like, really? Like, little kids understand that's not okay. I could talk to my girlfriend's like 9 and 6-year-old and they would understand that's not okay. And like, you're a grown man telling me you don't understand that.
Again, maybe this is another phenomenon that's caused by the internet to a certain extent, because okay. So a couple years ago, I sort of like lost my internet for a few months, and I was basically forced to engage life on life standards. And prior to that, I would have said that I was a complete shut-in, just antisocial to the max. And I had maybe like one friend outside of the internet, and basically like 100% of my time was spent on the internet, dealing with YouTube or Skype or whatever. And when I lost my internet, after I had gotten back from basically being forced to engage with life, I felt a lot more invigorated socially. I felt like I had a much better idea as to how to deal with people on a person-to-person basis. And I do think that I have vastly improved since those days. And I think I really do believe that being on the internet too much can cause your view of interpersonal communication to be very much warped.
Yeah, I think that's what was happening to me, because especially like, I don't know, like I was actually unemployed when I started my YouTube channel. But then I got a job like not too long after that. And I spent like a lot of time though. Like, it really took up too much time. I noticed I read less. I wrote a lot less. That's why I didn't finish. I ended up discarding a whole novel I was working on, because it's like, if you let yourself get too detached from a work, like Stephen King talked about this in like one of his books on writing. It's like, if you let yourself get too detached, like, you'll say, oh, I'll give it back to it later, but you probably won't. And if you get too detached, and that's what happened. It's like, it was pretty far along. Like, it's on a second draft. It's like, yeah, I have no connection to this. I don't even know who wrote this anymore. And so I had to start something over, and I started something over, and it was like easy. And I was like, oh, why do I ever want to be on the internet? Because like, I get so much more joy out of doing this. And like, so like, I started my YouTube channel when I was unemployed, because I was just like, oh, something to do. And I never thought I would get as active as I did, but I like saw myself being warped. And that was why I literally thought this was important. I was like, well, people are backstabbing me on the internet, and that's important. I was like, no, it's not important. It's not important at all. I shouldn't have thought of it as important. My indignation was my main sin. That was my main sin. It's like, I just was so, I had this righteous indignation that like, you're not going to lie about me. I'm going to tell people the truth. It's like, no one knows the truth. No one cares about the truth. No one, like, it doesn't matter.
Like, Chris, I like you. I consider you a good online friend. But throughout the whole process of the drama that you were going through, I believe I told you, and I also told everybody else who was asking me about it. I'm like, hey, Chris is going goddamn insane about this shit. Like, there was a lot of blowing things out of proportion, and I think that had to do with how much you hadn't already invested into the internet, which is good, which in a way is good because it's sort of it seems to have taken effect as far as like a lesson teaching moment for at least as far as like how much value you put into other people that you associate with on the internet, and whether or not you'll continue talking to them, what all is actually important in life. It really did seem to help you a lot.
People seem to be convinced. People seem to be convinced, and you saw like when that group splintered off from my group, they were like, "We're going to create a real social justice movement." And I just said the laughing witch on her video. I was like, "You are totally deluding yourself because your group's going to splinter off." And like this has happened to every group I belong to. Every group has a civil war, and then they splinter off. And the truth is, you're a slacktivist. You're not doing anything on the internet. I was doing something when I worked for Planned Parenthood, and it was part of my job. Like that was really doing something. If I go and volunteer to do something that in my community, I'm really doing something. I'm not doing something making videos on the internet. No. I'm not. No. You're not doing anything. It's like comparing what Bill O'Reilly's doing to what Obama's doing. It's like, who really has more power in society, the president or Bill O'Reilly?
I feel way more useful talking to the clients at my rehab facility about respecting women in helping any sort of movement than I do making videos on YouTube. Like far more. Like having little groups about it, having seminars about it, and helping them out with that stuff. That's doing way more. And I'm talking to really a smaller audience, honestly, too. Because when you're on YouTube, you're generally either talking to people who already are going to disagree with you and will continue to do so for a long time, or people who already agree with you, or the very, very small part of your audience who are people who are actually on the fence and interested in listening. But that group is so small. That's like maybe 1% of the people who watch you, honestly.
Yeah, well, the thing I was basically doing, though, is debunking MRAs, which I got bogged down into. And that, like, here's how you not be an MRA. You read a book sometime. You go out and you get some fresh air sometime. You go and you talk to people and interact with people in the world sometime. Like, the MRAs, like, their views are just so extreme. Like, the Republican Party, which is really extreme, and, like, they can't get, like, a national candidate, elected anymore. Like, the MRA views would not fly in the Republican Party. Like, some of them would. Like, Donald Trump is kind of like MRA light. But like, the really hardcore views, like the stuff that, your Dean Esmes say and your Paul Elam say would not, like, fly. Like, they wouldn't. Like, you couldn't get elected as an official for that. So what do you care? Like, what do you care? Like, people with no power say these things? Like, what do you give a shit about? And that's the thing. It's like the internet creates this illusion. Like, these are people. A lot of people are on the internet specifically because they're powerless. That's why it's to create this illusion that it's like, why don't you go out and make your life really mean something instead of creating this illusion that it means something. Now, the reason I flipped out because I put my entire life on hold for 6 months for somebody who was contemplating something that was supposed to be pretty huge, and they, like, acted like a total complete child, by my perspective, and, like, that's gonna fuck you up. Like, it's gonna fuck.
I do understand that, but I that's why I understood the initial rage. Like, I don't know if you remember when you first approached me about all of this kind of like brewing, and I kind of went insane about it too. For a short time, I understood the initial reaction that you had. I did, and we're justified in that. My problem was how long that dragged out on a level that I didn't.
It wouldn't have dragged out so far if, like, they were intentionally trying to drag me back, right? And, like, Zenistrad said,
you were letting them.
Yeah, I was like, and Zenistrad said to me, well, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. And that has not been the case. Because go and look at the vote downs on my new channel.
Dude,
like,
look at the vote downs on this video right now.
Yeah, like there's no comments, and like that's not the case. That's not the case at all. And like the reason I came to YouTube is I wanted to say things. Like YouTube just seemed like like one person did, like they wrote to me a personal message and they were like, well, you robbed yourself of speaking of stuff with nuance because you put yourself in opposition to new atheists is kind of what you did. So you just had to like, and that was kind of, what I was doing. Like I was in opposition to them. It's kind of how I started, but I just saw like this really dogmatic community. And I wanted to make people think. People don't want to think on YouTube. They want to like be told who the enemy is. And then,
And then what
it resembles, it resembles like politics, like party politics in the US, like a two-party system. YouTube does with no election.
Yeah.
Like that's what it resembles. And like I used to write a political blog like years ago. And like I used to sarcastically refer to the two parties as the Yankees and the Red Sox because like that's how people act. It's like the hardcore people are not going to vote for, like I learned this in a political science class years ago. The hardcore party people will always vote for their party, no matter what. You have their vote no matter what. They're always going to vote for the party. The moderate Republican and moderate Democrats might switch over. The independent leaning, or the Republican leaning independents and the Democratic leaning independents, you would think they would switch over at least as much as the moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans. Not true. They vote for the party that they lean toward almost as much as the people who call themselves hardcore Republicans and call themselves hardcore Democrats. And I was like, why is that the case? And like part of the reason I was thinking about it, I was like, well, maybe the people who call themselves independent Democrats are like more like socialists who like would rather vote for the Democrats, and like the Republicans are like, or the Republican leaning independents are more like libertarians. Like they don't agree with the Republicans on social issues, but like economic issues they agree with. So they're always going to vote. And that was one of the things that really confused me about right libertarians is like, you don't agree with your party on like 50% of their platform. So like, why are you? They're like really hardcore Republicans, like most right libertarians are. So like, they're like more into the party than like moderate Republicans are. And so it's like, but they don't agree with like 50% of your platform. And like, that's what it's like here. It's like exactly like that. He's like, you have to pick a side. If people don't pick a side, they'll try to push you onto a side. That's how it works.
Honestly, that's the reason why making a group based off of any one particular unifying ideological notion is always going to fail. I wouldn't say necessarily, but it's gonna happen a lot because, I mean, okay, so Coughlin went over this a couple years ago when the whole feminism thing started to become a huge hot topic. Is the atheists all united against the creationists, against the hardcore Christians, and arguing against them. And we were all together in this and said, you guys suck. And then the Islam stuff started going on. And then there was a little bit of a split because we realized that there were some other views that other atheists had that were somewhat toxic about different demographics of people. Then the feminist stuff started happening. Basically, once the religious people went away, we all started realizing, oh shit, we hate each other. Because we didn't realize, we unified over one ideology, but we didn't look at the rest of it and know, oh wait, you are entirely against me on literally everything except this one issue.
It's just ridiculous. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you fix something like this.
Once you learn how to do that, you can fix the internet. So, internet social.
Well, the internet's useless. I just love how, like, the Salman Rushdie, I was reading that today. I was like perfectly related to what we're talking about. It's just like, you just got to ignore those people and do what you want to do.
Yeah. I can't. There's been so many negative comments on here. If I started to just go through them and address them, like actually address them, oh my God, we'd be here for days. I'm not.
Literally, some of them will say, burn him at the stake.
One called you Brett Keane, which was weird. I don't even. Do you even know who that is?
Yeah, I know Brett Keane. That's okay.
But still, like, it's just weird.
Well, Brett Keane like changed his ideology all the time. So what they're saying is like, I'm an MRA now, and I used to like joke that.
No. It had to do with being a woman abuser.
Oh, was Brett King?
That was their thing.
I don't know anything about Brett King abusing women.
Well, he got arrested. He got indicted on beating his wife once. Or actually, I think it was a few times. But regardless, that was what they were trying to allude to.
It was actually a few times. But like, the funny thing was, like, I was talking to Jenny about evidence, and like, I was like, "There's no evidence for this," and she was like, "Well, does your mother have evidence of like?" I was like, "Yes." I didn't like even say that, but like my mother does. There are multiple arrests records, which are public record. There's a court record. There are pictures where my mother's face was hit in the face with a plate. Yep. Like there's evidence of it. It's like if I had to prove to somebody that my mother was abused, which I don't need to do on the internet. I don't need to prove to you jackasses on the internet anything about my personal life.
Yeah.
To ask for that and then like say, but when a woman says she's raped, you have to believe her 100%.
What we're doing is we're inviting everybody, every Yahoo on the internet, we're inviting them to basically become a jury. And everybody who comments on these issues feels obligated to give either a guilty or not guilty statement and and that they have to defend it as well. No, you really don't. There really is no need for you to do that. Like, this is something that people need to realize is you don't need to actually indict anybody in your mind at all. It's not necessary.
Yeah, I was arrested once in 2004 for disorderly conduct. That is the extent of my criminal record.
And that's because you were yelling at a woman. No.
No, it was because I was beating a transgender hooker.
Of course. And of course, since they're not really people, then, it was just disorderly conduct and not assault. God, this is terrible.
Also, like, I was cited with a hit and run when I was 19. And it was like a weird thing because I like hit a parked car. I was coming home from work. And I called the police and I was like, I hit a parked car. And because I didn't have any paper to like leave a note. Like, I didn't have any paper in the car. I was like, shit. And I was close to home. So I like went home and I was like, I hit a parked car. What do you want me to do? And they're like, well, you have 24 hours to report it. Well, that's like what the law is for like hitting a mailbox or something. It's not when you like park car. Apparently, park car, you're supposed to like do something immediately. Like, that's the letter of the law. So I was supposed to go back there and leave a note was what I was supposed to do. So like I go, okay, I got 24 hours and I worked nights then. So like I went to sleep and I woke up and I called the police and I was like, yeah, I hit this parked car. And they came out and then they cited me at the hit and run. Even though like the police officer I spoke to said I had 24 hours and I'm reporting it. So like they cited, and like the judge was a total dick. Like when I went in there, and luckily my mother was dating a cop at the time. This is after she divorced my stepfather. Was dating a cop at the time, who she met because he was one of the cops who arrested my stepfather one time, which is a funny story. Yeah, and he knew the prosecutor. So like he said, I'll talk to the prosecutor. And he talked to the prosecutor about it, and they were like, yeah, that's insane. He was reporting it. Why were they citing him to hit and run? And the cop was so pissed about it because he apparently got reprimanded by it. Like, he followed my mother from a bar. My mother has a bit of a drinking problem, but it was like a bar like right down the street from her house, and followed her. And then he pulled her over and like made her do the drunk test. And then he was just mean to her to the point where she talked back, and then he could arrest her for talking back to him, and then made her go to jail. Even though this was the same cop who cited me, I don't know what happened to that. I know she didn't get charged with anything, but that's why I don't like cops, by the way, in general. Even though like the cop my mom dated, he was like a great guy, and like even though I don't agree with the Iraq War, like he was still in the National Guard, and like when the war happened, like he went back, and like he was a war hero, and like he was a really great guy, but like 90% of cops are horrible people. I think that's a little high, but like I just kind of feel
that's probably a bit high, honestly.
He's like the only like really great cop I've ever known personally, though. Like as a person.
I've known a decent amount of good ones in my area. Anyway. That might just be because I'm in like a small area, so the cops generally just don't deal with problems a lot. So
I think that the cops in my particular city, like where I grew up, are really bad. It's just how I feel about it. It's like a crime-riddled city with a lot of racism.
Yeah, the more they have to deal with like serious issues like regular assaults and regular domestic violence, the more jaded they get, the more they just become assholes.
Yeah.
But if you're in a small town, the worst you have to worry about is like somebody came over to my house and hit my dog. Like if that's the worst thing you got to worry about, you're probably going to be a little bit more laid back as a cop.
Yeah, I guess so. Small town police officer. We've gotten really off topic.
Yeah, we did throughout a lot of this, actually. Though we did go over literally everything that you wanted to go over.
Yeah. Like, I wanted to keep it, like, really, like, kind of more academic, but we ended up talking about all the drama. That's what people really want. They want the drama.
They want the drama. They really wanted it. And, you know, they got it. So there you go. We went over everything you wanted to go over. We did not do it in an academic fashion, which, to be fair, is not the way that I want to do these Have a Chat sessions. I don't want them to be like, I'm just going to present my argument and let's discuss the finer points of this argument. I would prefer to have it be in a more, I guess, informal kind of way. And while that's not going to dissect a problem with a lot of nuance, I don't want to fight with people is the thing. So if I don't have any immediate problems with something that somebody's going to say, that somebody says, then I'm probably not going to bring it up. It's just my thing.
Well, I just don't understand, like, like I told you, like, if you said trigger warnings, you know, like what my ex thinks about trigger warnings. If you said that in this, like, community, they would flip out. Yeah. Like, they really would. And it's like,
that's what they would do.
It's not what I agree with, but it's not crazy either. Like, it's not like, it's not like Roosh, you know, rape should be legal on private property. Like,
totally fix the rape problem in the United States.
Yeah. Since we were talking about Louis C.K. later, I like kind of feel like his thing about the internet about how people overuse. I think he was talking about the word awesome, like how people overuse like words. And he was like, what are you going to do if Jesus comes down and makes love to you all night long? Go, what are you going to call that? That's how everyone is. It's like they just overreact to everything. Like everything is either like the greatest thing. And here's the thing, like YouTube videos are pretty bad. I'm just gonna like lay it out there. And it's like entertainment, they're bad. Like they really aren't. Most of them are like twice as long as they need to be. Very few of them have anything approaching a fact in them.
Honestly, I think there's a lot of people who use YouTube for background noise. Because I know I do.
Well, I know people do that because literally they will argue or they'll bring up a point. They used to bring up a point in my video that I brought up. And I go, I brought that up. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was doing laundry or like whatever. I was like, like, well, then why do I bother like doing these, you know, really dense things if you're not going to pay attention to it? Like, it doesn't help me if you watch it and don't pay attention. So, and that's why I realized it's just an entertainment platform. So like now I keep videos short and I like I'm probably giving you more information, more useful information because I'm talking about things and like nuances. And sometimes I'll like go, all right, here's the argument I'm making. Now here's the counter argument. I did that kind of in my Kingsman one. I was like, Matthew Vaughn is not being sexist here. Oh, here are some examples of places where he was sexist, by the way. Like, I did that in that video. And like, I'd much rather do that. Like that's because that actually encourages people to think rather than being like, and that's the thing is like, they want to figure out what you think so that they can find out if you're a bad person.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier with your prostitution article that you wrote. Is people were not actually reading through the whole article. I don't think anyway. They were reading through it and trying to figure out what your position on it is and whether or not they are going to say that you're a bad person or a good person.
Yeah, I actually don't have a concrete position on prostitution. I believe that I reject the like radical feminist view that it's just full stop. You can't. There's no such thing as a consensual exchange for sex for money between men and women. Like, I wonder how they feel like about what about gay prostitutes? Like, what, like, because it's two men and because there's, you know, they both benefit from patriarchy, then they can exchange. Like that would be a weird world where like same-sex prostitution is legal. I was like, that'd be an interesting like thing.
Yeah. Imagine that world where same-sex prostitution is legal and heterosexual sex prostitution is illegal. Imagine that for a moment, and imagine all the uproar over that. Oh my god! Are you saying that if I want to buy a prostitute, it's got to be a dude?
Because my view is closer, and I even say in that blog, like my view is basically what like socialist feminists would believe, close to that. But I'm not dogmatic about it. You can like, I don't believe exactly what every person who has that position like would call themselves that believes, and like you can convince me otherwise. Like but like that's where I'm coming from. I'm closest to that, and that was the thing with like Exile kept calling my view radical feminist. I'm like, no, it's not. It's look up what socialists think about prostitution, and you'll find like the exact same arguments I'm making. Like, just because you don't know anything about socialism does not mean that my view.
There's only two options with prostitution with a lot of people. It's either you're totally for it or you're totally against it. Those are your two options. You can't have nuance, and any sort of nuance that you try to inject into it is just going to be gone to, oh, you're just arguing in favor of the Swedish model.
You ever hear people say, I'm for background checks, but I'm against gun control, which I think is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard anyone say. But people say it all the time. I'm like, and I just feel like grabbing them and going, background checks are gun control.
Yes. That's an argument I had at work the other day. Is some guys like, man, gun control. There's no gun control in this country anymore, and I like it like that. I'm like, I don't. I'm pretty sure background checks are a good idea. He's like, sure, why not? You just said you don't want gun control.
Yeah, like I don't want to like pick on like I like Bad Mouse Productions, but he like did a video recently where like he was like, well, if you're like to the left, does that mean that you automatically believe in like strong gun control? Which like my view on gun control is like I would like to have some background checks. Perhaps like you have to get insurance for like at least.
Yeah, I would say regulate it in the same way that we regulate cars.
Yeah, like I would say, like I say that's reasonable. I'm not even necessarily for like bans on certain kinds of guns, but like I'm open to that idea. It depends on like you gotta show me like how this works and like what the actual results are. But like I'm pretty fluid on like what exactly the specifics are. Just like I'm in favor of background checks and like regulations. Like perhaps for at least certain guns you have to get insurance and things like that. But people, when I would ever mention guns, and I very rarely did, because I've learned this from when I was a political blogger, gun control is one of the issues that just people are just totally irrational about. But like I was watching a Young Turks recently about Bernie Sanders' gun record, and I actually have no problem with his gun record, none whatsoever. And like people don't think it's far enough left. I was like, it's pretty solid. Like they're like talking about, they were actually debating whether it was a bad idea that he voted against a bill where like that prohibited people from suing gun manufacturers because of shootings. I was like, no, that's fucking crazy. You can't sue a company because someone misused their product.
Yeah.
You have to sue the company.
That's like somebody strangles somebody with a plastic bag, and so you're going to sue the people who made the plastic bag. Like,
yeah.
How does that make any sense?
Yeah, like that's crazy. Like, why would you think? And like, of all the things for them to be extreme on the left about, it's like the stupidest thing. Because like they're not really to the left on anything, really. When you like really examine them, they're like right in the middle. But like Bad Mouse Productions, like he starts talking about, and he used to be an anarcho-capitalist, and now he's a libertarian socialist. He still has probably some of those bad logical things there was whatever, and he makes like this stupid argument where he says, I'm sorry I used the word stupid. Anyway, he makes a stupid argument where he says basically, well, yeah, they say that you're more likely to shoot a family member if you have a gun, but that doesn't take into account all the people who don't rob you because you own guns. Yeah, like empirical evidence shows that guns aren't deterrents because the states with more guns have more robberies. Like that's like there's studies about that. There was a study this year that did that. And like correlation doesn't equal causality. Those states tend to be with more guns, tend to be more conservative. So it could be other conservative policies that lead to there being more robberies. But it also does not support the idea that having guns in any way deters you from being robbed. Like it's not supported empirically at all. He just like pulls that out of his ass, just like a libertarian. There's no difference between his view and the libertarian's view. Like he's like, well, I'm against the fetish of guns. So I've talked to Marxists who like have that view. They fetishize guns just as much. If you like start talking to them about it, they're like, I need it to protect me from the government. They're coming for me. Like it's exactly like that. Like I have friends of Marxists, and he literally told me this story that makes him sound like Rambo, where he had to protect his family with this assault weapon. And like he's from Dayton, Ohio, where I'm from, and like I know it's a dangerous city to live in, but you did not like you weren't fucking John McClane, and you didn't like, stop Hans Gruber from killing your family. That's exactly how his story sounds, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm pretty 90% sure that entire story is in your head when he told me that story. But it was just like a libertarian power fantasy. There was no difference between it, and that's one of the reasons that like I don't identify as a Marxist despite having like a lot of Marxist sympathies, is because most of the people I know who identify as Marxists like have some views that I don't want to be associated with. So that's like the problem with labels. Is like I pick a label. I would rather not have a label. And I pick a label more based on like how problematic it is for getting people to understand me. It's like really not like on how accurate it is, because that's labels overlap. They, some of them are very non-specific, but it's like what label will best allow people. And the real truth is none of them are going to help you anyway. No one's going to understand anything you say. But I try. I still try to get people to understand me. Has anybody told me to die yet?
I believe so. I believe at least 3 people have. I'm pretty sure.
That's cool. What did I do again? Did I harass people? Is that why they're telling me to die?
You are a woman beater. And also you involved me in a lie, apparently.
What lie was that? Oh, I know what they're talking about. Yeah, like I showed you definitive proof of that, right?
Yeah.
There's no way you can. It's like, first of all, government website and a college website.
Yeah.
So like.
No. Wait, it's not about that. It was.
Oh, okay.
It was about just exchanges that were had in the first place and whether or not they actually happened. And then I think you said that I saw it happen in one of your videos, and then when I was asked about it, I said I'm not getting involved. Don't ask me. And now me saying I'm not going to get involved is me saying no, I never saw that. Apparently.
Yeah, well, JJ tried to do that too, and they just kept dragging JJ back in. And then finally, she was just like, "Yeah, here's the fucking Sage Lion thing." And then they were like, "You're a liar!" Still, after she showed it, so like it doesn't matter. You could be like, yeah, here's my definitive evidence of the thing I saw, and they would still call you a liar. So there's really like nothing you can do. So
yeah, it's the nature of the internet, unfortunately. I wish that we had some sort of solution to that, but we don't. We just the social sciences really need to start focusing more on the internet, honestly, because that's where we need a lot of help as to how to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Oh, my one ex was like, she's really interested in like the internet, like how it affects culture. Like she's an art historian. Though I thought that was kind of a waste of time, but maybe you're right. So like, she would study things like fan fiction though, and I'm like, why are you studying that? Like, and like what it means like sociologically.
Well, I mean, fan fictions, when you really get down to it, are basically just the fantasies of the people who write them for the most part.
Yeah.
Like that's what they are. So it's an expression of their idealization of reality, basically.
So yeah, but they're just like they're rewriting something else that someone else wrote. So or like writing variations on it
in a way in which usually places them in the story, or at the very least is how they think the story should go. And because of the fact that we can determine at least some things about a person through their work and how they present their work, then basically you can do that on a macroscopic scale with fan fiction. I mean, there's a whole shit ton of stuff there that we can use.
Yeah, but you have to wade through it. Most of it's like not even, even approaching proper grammar and spelling.
Well, yeah, that's kind of one of the barriers there.
Like a lot of fan fiction is erotic fan fiction, and I think like you don't want to give that to someone to proofread.
It's like, how are you going to use that as a citation? You know,
I have a hard time finding people to proofread my Spider-Man She-Hulk erotic fiction story. Which I wanted to see how many like because I always thought Spider-Man and She-Hulk would make a good couple, so I wanted to see like how much like fan fiction there was of that, and they're like, there's like 4 stories, but I thought there'd be a lot more. It was like they would make a good couple, like if they paired off in the comics. So
yeah, I you know, I was never a Marvel guy, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, I don't know. I was disappointed with the erotic fan fiction.
That's not something anyone has ever said before. You know what's funny? That's a very strange sentence to utter, and yet I'm fairly certain it's been uttered a lot.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed with the erotic fan fiction.
My ex was like telling me one time about like LA Confidential / fiction, where it's like Bud White and Ed Exley like getting together, and she was like, the woman who writes this writes just like James Ellroy. It's like she like, and like I would love to read that. I was like, she's like, it's perfect. I was like, it's perfect pastiche of Ellroy. It's like Ellroy wrote this, which he never would because he's kind of homophobic and well, I don't know. I think he might play that character because like people always say James Ellroy is like racist and stuff. I think but if you read his books, it seems like he's being critical of those qualities, and you're just kind of like, is he playing a character when he does that and just trolling people? But
yeah, not somebody who's really all that fantastic at analyzing literature. I mean, I can do it on an armchair basis, but
well, you'd have to analyze his statements. One time he said Obama looked like a lemur, and it seemed like he said that just to make people go, "You called a black man a monkey," and like it just seemed like he just was like, "Haha, I'm going to say this and see what happens." Like they can't do anything to me.
He might be a troll. He might, in fact, be a troll.
Yeah, it seemed like he did that. Yeah, and it was like, I wouldn't say that. So.
Well, of course you wouldn't say that. You're a reasonable person.
Well, not even to troll people. Like, I'll do stuff just to get a reaction. Like, sometimes I'll say I'll troll people. Like, when I say I'm trolling people, I'm just like, I'm just putting this out here to see how you react to it. I'm not saying that I don't believe this.
Yeah, you'll put forward something that you actually believe, but without a whole lot of clarification or nuance or anything like that, and just see what happens as a result. Like, that's a different form of trolling. Yeah,
like I do that all the time. And I especially started doing it after like people started hating me because there's like, what's the point? What I got to lose? And that was really why it kept going. The reason it kept going is because like I was having fun making people hate me to a certain extent. It was like, because at one point you see it like there are certain people I cared about, which some of those people I put too much confidence in. But like after like I just saw like, yeah, like just you don't even fucking know. These people won't fucking talk to you. Like that's the thing is like I would have to have a conversation with somebody before I would even like write them off.
That's why I'm doing this right now. That's why I decided to take the channel in this direction, is because I'm sick of all the people who just write everybody off as just this terrible person because they said X, Y, and Z, when you haven't ever even talked to them. You haven't sat down and had an actual conversation with them. You haven't cracked a beer and said, hey, let's bullshit for a second and see if we can get along. None of that's happened.
Well, I used to say I did to people like about Bewildered Ape, though, when like they would go, he's an asshole, and I would go, I've had so many private conversations with him. He's not an asshole. But now I kind of think he's kind of an asshole.
Well, you know, but the thing is, you might think that for different reasons than they think that, though.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's an irredeemable person. I don't think that. And I don't think he's trying to like do the thing. Like they act like he's like trying to tear the fabric of society apart with his videos, which like would be a pretty neat trick to do that with YouTube videos. But yeah, like people who like act like that Thunderfoot video, which I always had problems with it, like the cancer one, but like I not enough to like be like outraged by it. But now I think it's more problematic than I gave it credit for. But you know, like he's doing it like obviously what he's doing is like artistic. So like you give people license in artistic endeavors. Like Thunderfoot treated it like it was 100% serious, but then like said, "Oh, I get it, satire." But like then you're treating it like it's 100% serious. So Like they wanted to have it both ways about it, so it was just
really like they're trying to pay it as damned if he did, damned if he did, damned if he didn't. Like mean it. Like it doesn't seem to matter to them. Like either way, he's an asshole. You know. Like
no, that's the thing. It's like that's the thing. Like he's the bad guy. Like he's playing the villain. Yeah. It's like I made that joke in my videos too. Like I was really from the second video on, I was trolling people. Like already, I was like starting to put like these stylistic flourishes and like weird things in there and like in jokes and like stuff in the videos. Like after like the second video, after like this drama started, like that's why I like put all the Joker things in there. There's all the Joker, like the thing about me being the villain. It's like it's just funny to me. It's like yeah, it's like, and like these women like saying things like, oh, well, the only reason we're speaking out about this is because we want to warn other women about this. I was like, yeah, I don't meet women on YouTube. I meet them on Tinder.
Yeah.
Cupid, like a normal person. Like on the
I didn't check on mine.
Like, yeah, like you kept me from having a girlfriend for like a month. Wow. They didn't really do that, but that's like how long it took.
And you know what's really screwed up is that, and this goes in a whole nother direction from where we were going, but what's screwed up is that I really do think that there is some merit to the claims of white knights in the SJW movement.
Oh yeah, totally. You notice how like Bewildered Ape like said he was making a white knight video and we don't see it, but like all we see him doing now is white knighting Jenny.
Yeah,
it kind of make him look stupid if he made a white video criticizing white knights now, wouldn't it? So like that's all he does now, and that's really like why like Jenny got a hair up her ass, and then he attacked me because Jenny was attacking me, and then he couldn't explain it to me, and he thought I was being unfair to him because he made comments and I couldn't tell whether they were being sarcastic or serious, and he thought that I should like treat his sarcastic, hurtful comments where he denied my lived experience, and it's like he said before, it's like he said way worse things than me or Hannibal, but Hannibal and I were both like these horrible villains and the whole thing. And Hannibal explicitly said, like people kept strawmanning that he was denying someone who claims to be raped was raped, and it's like no, he said, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that by lying about someone else, you have now called into doubt other claims you've made, which gives fuels to MRAs. That was his argument, and he made it explicit. And he like,
it's an argument about communication, but that sort of nuance isn't available to a lot of people who are actually taking part in this and viewing the videos. They don't care that much.
Yeah, they care enough to tell you to die.
Yeah,
they don't care enough to understand what you're saying.
I remember it was a little while back, but I made a video where I literally just said, just admit you don't give a shit and go away. And that was after I had an argument with somebody in a comment section. I was just like, I just get this distinct impression that there's so many people who are involved in these arguments that really don't actually care about whether or not they're right or wrong. They're just arguing either A, because they have identified an enemy and they want to attack an enemy, B, they like whatever the status quo is and they're going to defend that because they probably see themselves as the status quo. I'm not quite sure, and they might see it as a personal attack for some reason. Or C, they're just trolls. Like there's just so many of them, and it's hard to tell so much when people make arguments as to whether or not they actually give a shit until you actually get into it with them and explain X, Y, and Z to them and lead them through the logical line. And then however they react to it is generally when you can tell whether or not they actually give a fuck.
Yeah. Like everything just gets so extreme. Like I find, like the whole thing, like, what did people think? Like, people think I was just faking caring about the things that I cared about, like, previously?
Probably. And you know what? And here's the funny thing. There are people who have done that.
Yeah, there are. But, like, here, like, the ladies and gentlemen thing, like, I was so frustrated with that because why are we talking about classroom etiquette? Like,
it's all about like classroom etiquette and not the larger conversation to be had about talking about the inclusion of trans people in society in relation to how we regularly interact with each other on an interpersonal basis. Like, it really, most of the videos covering that whole incident really missed the point, I feel.
Yeah. Sorry, Bunny was distracting me.
Probably get a little tired that you're sitting here, that you sat here for almost like 2.5 hours now.
Yeah. But there was something that was in my head, and then I got distracted by the rabbit. But yeah, I don't know what we were just talking about.
Bunch of stuff. Zenistrad actually wants to do hang out.
Yeah, I know. He just messaged me. It said I wanted to watch it. Let me know.
I'll probably cut this off here. Thank you for coming. If you want to have another one in the future, then I'm so totally up for that. You got my Facebook. You can contact me whenever you want to.
I'm gonna be beating this woman once the camera's not on me anymore. Perhaps choking her.
Just whatever your kink is, just imagine it. It's probably happening. Thank you to everybody who has joined us today. I believe we got up to 33 viewers, which is nice, I guess. And to everybody who's going to be watching this in the future, thank you for watching. This is going to be something that I'm going to try and make semi-regular if I can. Anybody who wants to have a conversation with me about anything, whatever it is, if it's something that I have even the remote amount of interest in, I'll probably do it. If you want to talk about something that we've talked about today, if you're one of the people that was mentioned today between the conversation between Chris and I, and you want to come on and like speak your piece, then whatever, you can do that. I don't care. We can have that conversation whenever you want to. Anybody who wants to talk, that's what this is for. Okay. So thank you everybody for your participation, and I'll be back in probably about an hour with Zenistrad. So I'll see y'all then.